So this morning we're going to be in Genesis 37. We're going to spend some time there. And as you turn there, I found this question as I was studying, if the question is this: are there chapters in your life of major difficulty in your life, in your past, that you would have not chosen, but because of what was developing you, you wouldn't change it, even if you could? And I don't really need details, but I just more want to know, show of hands, if that's true for you. Yeah.
Guilty.
Yeah, I think that's true for all of us. It's certainly true for me. I can think, I will volunteer some personal details. I remember when I was younger, and beginning to learn in the faith after I came to Christ, I struggled greatly with assurance of salvation. And I wouldn't take that away from me. I went to the altar 100 times, right? Let's say the first time. I went to the altar 100 times after that because I struggled with assurance. But what that forced me to do was it drove me to the scriptures to comprehend and understand that my assurance was rooted and grounded in those, not in how I felt about the experience that I had. So that's my own personal experience with that. I wouldn't change that past event for anything. And well, in the same way that tells me something about us, the rest of us, is that our past events are important. They're valuable. It's our sanctification, and we recognize its value, even when it comes at the price of pain, even when it comes at the price of difficulty. And we're going to begin today to look into the life of Joseph and the very difficult life circumstances that confronted him. Joseph will be the last figure that we look at in this section of Patriarchs and the formation of Israel. Joseph is really the bridge that carries us from the patriarchs proper, from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to the sojourn by the Israelites in Egypt. This last section is 14 chapters long or so. And we can think about Joseph's story in two parts, as it were, partition it into two parts. We can think about his humiliation, his humbling, and his exaltation. Today, we'll take a look at that humiliation, at that humbling, and all that will be formative, all that will be necessary even to his exaltation in the ongoing work of the sanctification in his life. The exaltation when he gets carried into Egypt is made into, we find, amazingly, is made into being like the prime minister of Egypt, even though he gets carried captive there. So let's begin reading here in Genesis 37. It says, "And Jacob went in the land where his father was a stranger in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age. And he made him a coat of many colors. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him, and could not speak peaceably unto him. And Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told his brethren, and they hated him yet the more. And he said unto them, Hear, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose, and also stood upright, and behold, your sheaves stood round about, and made obeisance to my sheaf. And his brethren said to him, Shalt thou indeed reign over us? Or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? They hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his words. And he dreamed yet another dream, and told his brethren, and said, Behold, I have dreamed a dream more. And behold, the sun and moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me. And he told it to his father and to his brethren, and his father rebuked him, and said unto him, What is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee to the earth? And his brethren envied him, but his father observed the same. And his brethren went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. And Israel said unto Joseph, Do not thy brethren feed the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send thee unto them. And he said to him, and he said unto him, Here am I. And he said to him, Go, I pray thee, see whether it be well with thy brethren, and well with the flocks, and bring me word again. So he sent him out of the vale of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. And a certain man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field. And the man asked him, saying, What seekest thou? And he said, I seek my brethren. Tell me, I pray thee, whether they feed their flocks. And the man said, They are departed hence, for I heard them say, Let us go to Dothan. And Joseph went after his brethren and found them in Dothan. And when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. And they said one to another, Behold, this dreamer cometh. Come now, and let us slay him, and cast him into some pit, and we will say, Some evil beast hath devoured him. And we shall see what will become of his dreams. And Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands, and said, Let us not kill him. And Reuben said unto him, Shed no blood, but cast him into this pit that is in the wilderness, and lay no hand upon him, that he might rid him out of their hands, to deliver him to his father again. And it came to pass, when Joseph was come unto his brethren, that they stripped Joseph out of his coat of many colors that was on him. And they took him and cast him into a pit. The pit was empty, there was no water in it. And they sat down to eat bread, and they lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites came from Gilead with their camels, bearing spicery and balm and myrrh, going to carry it down to Egypt. And Judah said unto his brethren, What profit is it if we slay our brother and steal his blood? Come and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh. And his brethren were content. Then there passed by Midianite merchants, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit, and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. And they brought Joseph into Egypt. And Reuben returned to them, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit. And he rent his clothes, and he returned to his brethren and said, The child is not, and I, whither shall I go? And they took Joseph's coat and killed the kid of the goats, and dipped the coat in blood. And they sent the coat of many colors. And they brought it to their father and said, This have we found, for know now whether it be thy son's coat or not. And he knew it, and said, It is my son's coat, and evil beasts hath devoured him. Joseph is without doubt rent in pieces. Jacob rent his clothes and put sackcloth upon his loins and mourned for his son many days. And all his sons and his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. And he said, For I will go down into the grave unto my son mourning. Thus his father wept for him. And the Midianites sold him into Egypt unto Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's, and the captain of the guard. So, it's a rather lengthy reading there, but this sets our scene. We have Joseph, we have his brothers, we have Jacob, their father, we have Jacob's 4 wives. His 2 wives and his 2 concubines. But here the concubines are called wives. It's unclear if this section is out of sequence, because in the dream, Joseph talks about the mother bowing down as well. But the mother, his mother, Rachel, has already died by this point. Died a few chapters back. So it's perhaps possible that this section is out of sequence, or maybe it refers to the stepmother. We don't really know. But in any case, we have this family drama, just this really messed up family. Jacob favors Joseph because he's the son of his old age. And what's worse to the brothers is that Joseph is this dreamer of dreams. And in those dreams, Joseph always comes out on top. So they don't like that. Joseph appears to keep close tabs on his brothers. He brings an evil report to Jacob. And then later he's sent to check it on his brothers. We read that his brothers are like green with envy, and they plot to kill him. So Reuben here convinces them, let's not kill him. Let's put him into a pit, a dry well, a cistern. We talked about those last week, same idea here. Let's put him into a cistern, this dry well. And Reuben's idea was, I'll go back later and pull him out. But in the meantime, Judah suggests selling Joseph to some slave traders, to these Ishmaelites. And they do that. And to conceal their treachery, they take off this coat of many colors that they hate, and they dip it in blood, animal blood. They show it to the father, and the father presumes it's obvious that a wild animal has devoured Joseph. I think just first here, looking at kind of the big picture, we see the outworking of generational sin and deceit in this family. In case you didn't know it, 4 wives, 12 sons, and 1 father is a recipe for strife and division and pride, favoritism. It's just a picture of dysfunctionality. We can look at the pattern of behavior here that we have observed over the last several weeks and see that. There's a lot of good, of course, but dispersed among all that good is quite a lot of folly. It's quite a lot of sin. There's lies and there's trickery. Abraham deceived Pharaoh, deceived Abimelech about his relationship to his wife. Isaac does the same thing later. Rachel and Jacob conspire to gain the blessing for Jacob by deceiving Isaac. Now we see in this chapter more conspiracy, more deceit continue. We see it being developed here in some unfortunate ways. And chapter 37 here is, I think, foremost a study of jealousy. That's really the main idea. When we think about jealousy in the Bible, we really mean one of 2 types of jealousy. The first is a godly sort of jealousy. It's vigilant, it's protective, it's possessive. The Bible says our God is a jealous God. He's possessive over his bride. He's possessive over the church. And he expects us men to be protective over our wives in a like manner. To love them as Christ loved the church. This kind of jealousy then is really about love. But that isn't the kind of jealousy that people usually mean. And that isn't the kind of jealousy that we have in mind today here. The second sort of jealousy is an expression of envy. It's when we resent someone of their status, their possessions, of their life. So why was Joseph so hated and so begrudged by his brothers? Was it really justified? I think not. I think an observation that we can make about Joseph is that we find no evidence of any flaws in Joseph. I don't think. That he's naive. That's about the most you can say, perhaps, is that he is naive. He sort of doesn't realize that telling his brother this dream he had from God might upset them. Naturally, of course, he's not sinless, but it does seem that he was blameless. It seems that he was above reproach. It seems he was a person of integrity, that he was devoted to his faith and to his family. Yet, that family hated him. His brothers hated him. And I think that's for a few reasons. First, he told his father of his brother's sin. That's in verses 1 and 2. No one ever likes that. No one likes to tattle him. Second, because his father loved him more than them, they hated him. He was preferred. And then I think too, in verses 5 through 11, we see that they hated him because he had been set over them in authority. I think that's what we'll discover here as we progress, that he has some measure of authority over them. Looking at verses 2 through 4, I see here it says, these are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren, and the laggers with the sons of Bilhah, the sons of Zilpah, the father's wives. And Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. Now Israel, that's to say Jacob, loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him, did not speak peaceably unto him. In reading this section, I'm reminded of Proverbs 9:8 tells us, reprove not a scorner, lest he hate thee. Rebuke a wise man, he will love thee. Joseph's brothers were scorners. They did not appreciate in the least that Joseph was being a tattletale on their bad behavior. And we don't know what they were doing. Perhaps they were slacking in their work. But in any case, he brought back to their father this evil report, this bad report of their behavior. Now, as we continue here and we look here at this coat of many colors that's mentioned, we all have heard about the coat of many colors. You know, there's that play called the Technicolor Dreamcoat that came out. We see that Israel loved Joseph more than his children, and he made him this coat of many colors. This is how Jacob manifested his favoritism. And I think it's reasonable to think of this coat kind of like Elijah's mantle or the ephod of the priest. In other words, it's a vesture of authority, of status. It represents Joseph's divine favor with God and the favor of his earthly father. In fact, when you look at the meaning behind this garment, it's the idea that it had these long sleeves and that it went down to the ankles. And so it was a very cumbersome sort of garment in a lot of ways. It wasn't like your typical sort of tunic that you would use for work. It was finely made. It was not work attire. You know, we talk about white collar work, white collars and blue collars today. It's kind of the same idea. You know, white collar is the boss. Blue collar is the people who work for the boss. So it seems that this coat might indicate that Joseph had some sort of supervisor or supervisory role. And this makes sense. It really accords well with these dreams of dominion that he has over his brethren. And what we learn later about Joseph in Egypt as he's made prime minister there. This coat also has an indication of royalty to it. You know, clothing back then, if it was of color, this was always what somebody who was in nobility would wear, royalty would wear. Somebody rich would wear that. In 2 Samuel 13:18, Tamar has a similar article of clothing. It says that she had a garment of diverse colors, that such robes were were what the king's daughters were apparelled in. So it perhaps symbolized royalty, perhaps symbolized authority. But the main thing to take from this here is that this is a continuation here of the elevation, that theme of the elevation of the younger over the older. We read about this last week with Jacob. Jacob is the younger, but the elder, we're told, will serve the younger. Again, it's the same idea. And next here we see in this middle part of the chapter that these two dreams, these two visions, these oracles of God that Joseph has. In this first dream, he dreams that he and his brothers are out in the field. They're gathering sheaves of grain, and each man's sheaf represents himself, and the 11 sheaves, the 11 brothers bow down and recognize the authority of Joseph as chief. Sheaf, my goodness. And then we have the second dream, same idea. We have this sort of picture of the cosmos, or at least in as much as Bronze Age people understood it. I've read that it was representative of the zodiac. I don't know that for sure, but planetary bodies in any case. And they bow down, they do obeisance to Joseph, to him. They read that Jacob isn't pleased by that at all, but he observes the same. It's kind of like Mary, many hundreds of years later, who, after the shepherd's visit, making on what the angels have said, it says she kept all these things and pondered them in her heart. And it's sort of the same idea here, sort of the same notion. Jacob is paying attention to these dreams, and he's thinking, well, maybe there's something to that. Besides my son is being absurd or something. Any questions so far? Any thoughts?
Well, I did know, we started off talking about the humiliation of Joseph and God preparing him for a purpose, but this is also the same, speaks also for Israel as a whole, preparing them in the same manner. And it's all centered around several hundred years in Egypt. So God preparing his people, and it began with Joseph. So it's fascinating that we go through the troubles we go through, and it's God's sanctifying work, and it's never fun at all. But the things he does to us, and the skinned knees and bloody nose that we end up with when we come out of it, makes us more humble when we come out the other way, and more ready to pursue Christ, to follow him, and to leave our stuff in the dirt.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an excellent picture of sanctification. Let's look here at this next section of verses. We'll start in verse 14. It says, "And he said to him, Go, I pray thee," this is Jacob speaking, "Go, I pray thee, see whether it be well with thy brethren, and well with the flocks, and bring me word again." So he sent him out of the vale of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. We see here that Joseph is about his father's business. That's the main thing about this section I want to observe, is about his father's business. He was devoted to him, and he was devoted to his family. I think we can only assume the best here for Joseph, that he was motivated by duty, but also by love, that he went to check to see, as his father said, is it well with your brothers? Is it well with the flocks? He had their well-being on his mind, despite the fact that they so hated him that they couldn't even speak peaceably to him. I think this is remarkable. It's definitely for most of us, it's kind of unbelievable, but I don't think we could do that. I couldn't do it. I couldn't be that nice. The best I could do is not speak peaceably back to them, I think. But Joseph here rises above that. And I'm reminded here in this section of just what it means to be the children of our Father in heaven. This is a wonderful point of application for us this morning. Remember, Christ said, "You've heard that it hath been said, Thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thine enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you, that ye may be children of your Father which is in heaven. For he maketh the sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and he sendeth rain on the just and on the unjust." It goes on to say, "Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect." You see, the kind of love that Joseph had was a righteous love. That not only loved when he was loved, but even when he was hated. It wasn't just reciprocal. Even when he was rejected. And this is the kind of love we read that we're to have as children of God. It's the kind of love that Christ had for us. God commended his love for us. He demonstrated it towards us, and that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. So we see here sort of Christian love typified. I want to jump down here now to verses 18 through 20. We're going to see where the brothers' jealousy, their hatred, their envy takes them. Verse 18, they saw him afar off. Even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. And they said one to another, Behold, this dreamer cometh. Come now, therefore, and let us slay him. It says here, this dreamer comes. Who were they opposing by hating Joseph in his dreams? It wasn't really Joseph. It was God. God's the one who gave Joseph the dreams. They didn't like it. And it just reminds me that when you live your life in accordance with Scripture and you speak the truth, people will often hate you for it. But they're not really hating you, they're hating God. But he says, they say, let us slay him. You know, sin is a cruel taskmaster. It won't relent until you're dead, or oftentimes someone else is dead. It carries us deeper and deeper and deeper into depravity. That's why hatred is described as murder. The heart that motivates the murderer to take his brother's life is the one that's brimming with hatred. John 3:15, remember that? 1 John 3:15, whosoever hates his brother is a murderer, and you know that no murderer hath eternal life abiding in him. This is what jealousy does. It causes hatred, division, avarice, and when it takes its full course, it causes murder. It's what Cain did to Abel. It's what Esau tried to do to Jacob, and now it's what the brothers plot to do to Joseph. Remember the parable? When I was thinking about this, when they look and they see him coming and they say, let us slay him. And it reminded me of Matthew 21, 33 through 39. Jesus says, hear another parable. There was a certain householder which planted a vineyard and hedged it round about, and digged a winepress, and built a tower, and let it out to husbandmen, and went into a far country. And when the time of the fruit drew near, he sent his servants to the husbandmen, that they might receive the fruits of it. And the husbandman took his servants, and beat one, and killed another, and stoned another. Again he sent other servants, more than the first, and they did unto them likewise. But last of all he sent unto them his son, saying, they will reverence my son. But when the husbandmen saw the son, they said among themselves, this is the heir, come, let us kill him, let us seize on his inheritance. They called him and cast him out of the vineyard and slew him. It's the same idea. Christ came to his own, and his own received him not. They saw him, they plotted to kill him, even as their fathers had killed the prophets before Christ. And that's just like human nature. That's just like our fallenness. It happens that those nearest and dearest to us in this life, those who we should have really the most confidence in, are the ones that are most likely to betray us when our faith and their lack of faith divides us. You know, we see this with Christ, right? And not only did the people of God refuse him, not only did Israel refuse him, but even Judas. Even Judas went against him. And we don't, I don't think we realize, we're giving up credit to how much of a blow this would have been. We're all very used to knowing that Judas is this sort of black, traitorous figure. But, Christ was a human being like the rest of us. Yes, of course, he knew the end from the beginning, but that doesn't change the fact that your friend, a friend that is as near as a brother to you, has rejected you and sells you out for 30 pieces of silver. That's another parallel too, incidentally. Judas sells Christ out for 30 pieces of silver. The brothers sell Joseph for 20 pieces. You see, Judas here wasn't some stranger. He was one of the 12. He was one of Christ's chosen. Yet he betrayed him. Psalm 41:9 says, "Yea, mine own familiar friend, in whom I trusted, which did eat of my bread, hath lifted up his heel against me." And let me say too here, as we look at Joseph's life and how his brothers treated him, the more we're conformed to Christ, the more we're zealous to good works, we will become, as I said, stranger and stranger to those nearest us. Our earthly brothers and family will reject us. Psalm 69:8-9 tells us, "I am become a stranger unto my children, unto my brethren rather, and an alien unto my mother's children. For the zeal of thine house hath eaten me up, and the reproaches of them that reproach thee are fallen upon me." Of course, we read in John that refers to Christ. You remember, too, when Christ was, during his earthly ministry, he's preaching, and his friends heard of it, and they went out to lay hold of him, and they said, "He's beside himself." They thought he was crazy. The multitude said about him, and they asked him, "Where's your mother? Where's your brethren? That they seek for you." And he said, "Who is my mother? Who is my brethren?" And he said, "Those around me, those who do the will of God, those are my brothers, my sisters, my mother, those are my family." So here we see jealousy, hatred, greed. These things are incredibly destructive. And when you have your righteous behavior on one hand as born-again believers, the wickedness of the unregenerate, of unbelievers, it becomes like oil and water. And it will sever you naturally. It will cause hatred, cause murder. James, I know we've read this before, James 4, starting in verse 1, writes, "For whence come wars and fightings among you? Come they not hence, even of your lust that war in your members? Ye lust and have not, ye kill and desire to have and cannot obtain, ye fight and war, yet ye have not, because ye ask not. Ye ask and receive not, because ye ask amiss, that ye may consume it on your lusts. Ye adulterers and adulteresses, know ye not that friendship of the world is enmity with God? Whosoever therefore will be a friend of the world is the enemy of God. Do you think that Scripture says in vain, the Spirit that dwells in us lusts to envy?" His brothers had that spirit of envy, that spirit of jealousy. They fought to kill Joseph. I think Romans chapter 1, 28 and 29, it gives really a perfect description of these brothers. It says, Paul says, "And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a reprobate mind, to do those things which are not convenient, being filled with all unrighteousness, fornication, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, debate, deceit, malignity, whispers." And we're quick when we read that list. I think we're quick to leap to improper conclusions, quick to judge these brothers, and yet not judge ourselves, to sort of ally ourselves with the righteous characters in the Bible, but not the unrighteous. But Paul tells us in the following chapter, in Romans 2:1, he says that when we make such judgments, we condemn ourselves because we do the same things. So let's not be too harsh on the brothers here, while understanding their sin. Let me stop here and say, does anybody have anything to add, any thoughts, or? I have a few more things to say, but I want to open up the floor in case anybody wants to.
You know, with Joseph's dream and the typology with Israel and his future with Israel, in the short, immediate fulfillment of this prophetic dream, there's also a far away ultimate fulfillment of that dream in the second dream in Genesis 37. You just make a note for Revelation chapter 12. There's always confusion about who is this in Revelation 12?
Yeah.
Who's the woman? Is that Mary? And all these other kinds of poor ideas, but it really harkens right back to this. This is about Israel
Yeah.
and their fulfillment in God saving them, just as he did Egypt, with them fleeing out of Egypt. Here they're fleeing out of attack in Revelation 12, and God shelters them in the mountains again in Revelation chapter 12, where he feeds them for 3.5 years. It's an interesting corollary.
Yeah, yeah. I had that, not in these notes, but I had it somewhere. I noted that, the correlation there. I think it's interesting to think about, this is obvious, everybody talks about this, but the ways Joseph typifies Christ. I mean, it's interesting that the New Testament never really makes anything of it, but like it seems very apparent. You know, Joseph is the beloved son. His brothers hate him. He's betrayed. He's stripped of his robe. He's rejected.
I think you're right. I think he's a type that people work with Moses too, the way he was almost murdered as an infant. There's this typologies that God scatters, which is part of the reason why we're here doing this survey, is so that we can see these breadcrumbs, if you will, that God sprinkles throughout the entire Old Testament. So when we get to the New Testament, we can say, aha, okay, I see what you did there.
Yeah, you know, I think it's interesting too. But the biggest thing I think when I look at Joseph's story is that his death, as it were, is being carried away into Egypt, is the reason that it says in chapter 50, verse 20, it says that it's what saved much people alive. It's what caused the salvation of many. And it's the same thing with Christ, of course. Christ's death, his burial, and resurrection is the reason that we are saved. I think that's really just one of the most pressing similarity. I think, you know, when we think about these 20 pieces of silver that the brothers sold Joseph for, you know, I mentioned the similarity with Judas.
Judas was later, so there was inflation.
Yeah, yeah, it's very easy to drive. And what occurred to me, the question that I had as I read that, I thought to myself, that it's worth asking, what is your price? How much or how cheaply do we betray our Lord when we sin? You know, Jesus said, if any man will come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross and follow me. See, for whosoever will save his life and shall lose it, whosoever will lose his life for my sake shall find it. But what is a man profited if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? And what shall a man give in exchange for his soul? They profited in the short term, but there was a penalty to be paid there. Like, you know, they were wrong. They betrayed their brother. Now God was gracious to them, as we'll come to find out. But let's keep that in mind. You know, I'm not suggesting that we betray Christ, that we actually betray Christ. I'm saying that there is a lesson to be learned here that when we sin against Christ, we're behaving in much the same way. We're counting what he has done for us as something cheap, as something tawdry, as something that can be cast away for the pleasures of the moment, or whatever the sin is. Let me read here. I'll wrap up here. We read in this last section. Then there passed by Midianite merchantmen, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit, and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver, and they brought Joseph into Egypt. And then we drop down to verse 36 here. It says, and the Midianites sold him into Egypt, got the Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's, and a captain of the guard. So this section here that we close out with is really relating the captivity, the beginning of the captivity of Joseph. It's kind of, this is a section I've always found to be difficult to understand exactly what's going on. Because you have these Ishmaelites, that's to say, the people of Ishmael, Isaac, Abraham's son. And the boys see this company of Ishmaelites, this caravan, and the best that but then it says, and the Midianites sold him into Egypt. The best that I can surmise, this is only a surmise, was that among them were some Midianites, and the boys determined to sell Joseph to this caravan, and so this Ishmaelite caravan, but more precisely, perhaps they sold them to the Midianites. I really don't know. It's very difficult to sort of parse out exactly what's.
Well, it could have been a profit kind of a thing.
Yeah.
The brothers sold them for 20. Midianites might have purchased them from the Ishmaelites,
Yeah.
or vice versa, or
Yeah.
whatever, and then they took them to Egypt, and the Egyptians paid more for them.
Yeah, it could be.
It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I read several commentaries on it. There's several different answers that you can sort of pick.
Yeah.
One commentary simply said, well, the Ishmaelites and the Midianites are the same group here, that it's generic. I don't really agree with that because, wow, they call different names, but, that was one idea. I think that's all I have. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions? Or I know it's a little shorter today.
No, I would suggest that if you're ever looking for a movie to watch or whatever, the TNT from, I want to say, maybe the 1990s, early 2000s on the story of Joseph was really done pretty well. They did two of those. I thought they did pretty well, and the other one was Daniel. Of course, Daniel would only take you right up to chapter 9 and they stop. Because it poses some problems, and the people who wrote it and produced it were Jews. So you don't want to get into chapter 9 of Daniel, because that points right at Christ. You don't want to do that, so they stopped there. But the story of Joseph was really done well too. A good cast, well acted, and they're both well worth watching.
I'd be interested to see what kind of conversation was happening between Joseph and the brothers in verses 18 to really 25. Because I don't see anywhere laid out that Joseph struggled with his brothers. I don't see then once he was thrown down in the pit and he was sold, he doesn't, I'd be like, guys, I'm not for sale. This is what my brothers did to me. I'd be running away, I'd be fighting these people. I don't see any, there's no account of any of that there. Yeah. This almost seems, at least with the absence of all this, it almost seems that Joseph was willful. At least that's just my deduction. I have no evidence. Joseph isn't speaking in any of this.
Yeah.
Joseph doesn't make any kind of defense.
No protest.
Yeah, nothing. There's no protest from him.
I just kind of thought the guys were kind of going, hey, Joseph, hey, come here, we want to show you something.
Sure.
Walking him out there.
Yeah, and let's say they do that. Go ahead.
I was just going to say on the surface of it, on the generality, that when you've got 11 brothers that are willing to kill you, you don't really put up much of a fight when you're against 11.
Well, I think if you're going to be dead anyway, I'd be fighting the. You know what I mean?
No, I think I'd be willing to go to the pit and just sit there and wait for another way out.
And then when Egypt gets there, those people, they're all alone. I'd be
Who
protesting.
wants to go back and live with 11 brothers that want to kill you?
Yeah, well, that's true too.
I don't know that.
That's just.
I can't imagine going to an Egyptian prison as a slave would be any better.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't see. There's nothing. There's no even monologue.
You
of
don't know
Joseph.
how long he was down there. Like it says they stripped him of his tunic
Yeah.
and they threw him in. So like, and depending on how deep it is, that could have knocked him out. He could have been laying
Sure.
down there, and he wakes up and he's on the back of some mule.
Oh, okay, I'll take that.
Yeah. Indeed.
How did they get down there if it was that far?
I wanted to throw it up with a rope. I don't know. It has to be far enough for him not to be able to get out.
Spend a fortnight leaving wool in your robe.
Yeah.
And then also, when the decision was made to kill Joseph, one of the brothers said, well, let's just not kill him. But that wasn't because there was any punishment for a murder right then. They just, well, nothing's going to happen to us if we kill him. We'll be gone, and all troubles will be over.
Yeah.
The only law back then was either God's law or the king's law.
And they didn't really know God's law. It hasn't been revealed yet. Because that doesn't get revealed until the next chapter, until Exodus.
Mm-hmm.
So really, this is kind of the point when we get into Exodus. It's not until Exodus we find out who God is. We find out who his laws and his holiness. And we don't. So at this point in Genesis, we don't have a lot of information about God yet.
Yeah.
And it isn't until the revelation of the law that he gives to Moses that we really get an understanding of who God is. Because he hasn't revealed himself much yet.
Yeah.
So 39:2, the Lord was with Joseph, and later on it says the Lord was with him. So this, I would think this speaks of a prior, not like a prior relationship knowledge. So the same thing that got him through the brothers being mean to him is getting him through here. Because there's no way he would be able to hold this standard up unless he already had that.
Had God. So that would, again, to me, attest to, because later on, when he gets into meeting his brothers, he says the same sentiment, that God used this to effectively save the remnant people. There is a purpose, and it's explicitly clear that God did all this to Joseph for a purpose, to save Israel, to save the people, because the famine coming up in Exodus, right? So I have to believe that in 37, to her point, God, there's some understanding and relationship here with God and Joseph. It's got to be.
Well, it's kind of like David when he was out with the sheep. David grew in his love and relationship with God there. Even though God doesn't reveal what they were doing there, he was doing something. You know, Job, we don't know. Job and that relationship, he was sacrificing and doing something. But God, just because he doesn't reveal it to us, doesn't mean he's not working and growing the remnant relationships, people.
Yeah, in 39:5, regarding Potiphar, it says, the Lord blessed that Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake.
Testify as a witness to this, he is special, and
Yeah. Potiphar's taking good care of Joseph, so God obviously approved of Joseph and said, bless Potiphar for that, for those reasons.
So that may be why there's no account of any protest or anything from Joseph, because Joseph knew this, at least in some way.
Trusting God,
Yeah,
maybe.
to me, that's.
Yeah. Does Joseph count as a patriarch? We count him? I know we are for the sake of this.
Through his sons, a couple of the tribes, remember, there's tribes cursed, things got swapped out or whatever, so he's one of the tribes and one of the sons of the tribe, so I guess you'd say if you're talking 12 tribes of Israel, you have to say, well, yeah.
Yeah.
To my understanding of the Jewish culture, how they revere Joseph, yes, he is very much so, because we get into Exodus, we'll get into a little bit of the Jewish history. The Exodus is one of the foundational events in Jewish history, and Joseph, along with Moses, is credited, at least that I understand, with that event, with the Jewish history, because it was through him that Moses was able to come. God used Joseph to bring about Moses.
Yeah, I was thinking, like, if memory serves, Joseph had his dreams, but God doesn't appear to him and discuss the covenant.
Right.
I've never seen that.
Yeah, I don't recall it. So I don't know. It's just interesting. But like he does appear, he does reveal his purposes through the dreams. I don't know.
Some kind of dreams that were remarkable enough that he decided to tell the family, guys, I had this weirdest dream last night.
Yeah, that's what strikes me, because like some people say he's arrogant or something, but like, I don't get that. I just get that.
That's not in the text, is it?
Yeah,
But
it's
he's
just,
being arrogant.
Yeah, like the only view you get to see of how Joseph used his brothers is sort of in like 42 when he's about to get to Egypt, and he's just so like, I'm a mess with them. He wants them to sweat. He wants them to suffer a little bit. No, like that's years after he'd already been thrown in the pit. So you have no idea what was going on with him and with his brothers until his brothers show up and he's like, I'm taking the young one because he wasn't there when I was there, so I'm gonna take him now. And he wants them to feel bad. So like, I don't know.
I think the text, what we get from the text though, is really he wants to find out how they've changed, where their hearts are. Have they changed at all for the better, or are they still the same jerks they were several years before?
Yeah.
So he was kind of testing, let's see how they respond here. And so he was doing, it was a gut check
Yeah, it's
for his brothers.
with a lot of the patriarchs, there is no focus on them really. Like it's their story, but like it's all like just you try and put yourself in that situation. That the Lord knows. We just need to know what happened.
See, that's why I think you're right. What you just said, when you put yourself in their position, because I'm thinking about the arrogance thing. I don't see that, because if you imagine you're Joseph, because in the next chapter, Joseph is put in prison, right, for what happened with the wife, Potiphar's wife.
Yep.
And when you look at that, just that short account of his imprisonment there before his interpretation of dreams, it says in 39:20 that Joseph's master took him and put him in jail, the place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was in jail. But verse 21, but the Lord was with Joseph and extended his kindness to him, and he gave him favor in the sight of the chief jailer. Joseph didn't know that. Joseph didn't know that God gave, at least it doesn't say that there. So, to Joseph, he's in prison. He's rotting in prison. I don't see any arrogance there. I think there's a purpose for that imprisonment, to keep that humility and reliance on God, maybe for Joseph's part. Because not all of Joseph's life after his being sold was good. Right? It wasn't. God was still intervening in his life, and still, at least I would take from the text, the opposite of arrogance. I think God is keeping him humble.
That's an interesting other side of the same coin. A lesson for us is that we don't know what God's doing in the background when we're going through the trauma we're going through.
Well, she talked about Job. Job didn't know that God and Satan had this talk in heaven.
Yeah.
Job didn't know that God allowed Satan to do all this. Because if he would have known that, he would have said, God allowed it, so I'm just going to go through it. I'm good.
Yeah.
He didn't know that. Job was protesting a little bit. He was like, guys, well, why are you allowing this, God? But here in Joseph, he's in prison. He doesn't know that the Lord has given the chief jailer favor towards Joseph.
What if he does?
Maybe he does.
But I mean, God is doing the same thing with he's got dreams. He's doing, God is blessing. Obviously, he's doing well because the dad's giving him that position.
Yep.
So then he's back in Potiphar. He's like, okay, God, we're doing the same thing. Whatever relation God was with him, whatever relationship he has, God is still affirming that. So he's still Potiphar's blessing. And what if he knows that? Okay, God, you're blessing. I'm doing the same thing I did with my father. You're blessing me, because they would have seen the blessing from God. So then same thing happens. He's good. He does everything good. It happens again. And he's like, okay, we're here again, God. And then in jail, again, we don't know that relationship. Maybe God was talking to him. We don't know. But same thing. All of a sudden he gets the dreams. And he's like, you're still with me, God. Okay, I'm good. I just need to be good. He answers their question. There's no fighting, because maybe he is good with God, and he knows that. I mean, he's a type of Christ. So as he goes through his life and he's getting beat on, okay, I'm just going to be about my Father's business. I'm going to do that good work. And then eventually now I'm here. And he sees that progression. But maybe he does. I mean, maybe
maybe.
That's why you were saying, I don't see arrogance, because maybe he's just...
I think he's humble, and he's relying on God.
And it's interesting, because when the reins are on you, like in a situation like that, where you can be squished like a bug any moment, you're going to be a lot more humble and submissive to God than way his brothers were out free in the open. And Dad thinks we're working, ha ha ha, let's go to the bar in town, and they're off doing whatever. And they're not doing the work they're supposed to be doing. So that's the way we can be when the feathers are off. And we tend to think about ourselves and care about ourselves, and not so much about submitting to God.
See, I would argue that Joseph is trusting. I don't see arrogance here.
Yeah.
I see abject trust, because he is, to me, in jail. I agree. I think he's probably like, God's got me here so far. I'm just going to trust. I don't know what God's doing behind the scenes. It doesn't say in the text that God told him he gave favor in the sight of the chief jailer. For all Joseph knew, that chief jailer hated him because he's in jail. I'm going to trust anyway. See, I don't see arrogance there at all. I see humility and trust. That's what I see.
Yeah. Similar kind of character, again, we mentioned before, Daniel, similar kind of character, being thrust into a really weird position. As Daniel found several times, is that, while you're within a hair's breadth of death, so many times, but God is there, and trusting God for the outcome. That kind of character is amazing.
Thank you, Andy.
Yeah.
Good stuff.